The sun beat down on the unforgiving trail, turning the red earth into a fine, choking dust that clung to Mary's worn dress. Her husband, James, had been dead for 2 months, a victim of a fever that had swept through the small town of Redemption. In his absence, his family, a stern, unyielding clan of ranchers, had shown their true colors. They saw Mary not as a grieving widow, but as an intruder, a burden on their land, and a threat to their inheritance. Mary, now in her 3rd month of pregnancy, had been given an ultimatum: leave the ranch or be cast out. She chose the former, her pride a fragile shield against their venom. She had only a small satchel, a few coins, and the heavy burden of her unborn child. The nearest town was miles away, and her strength was fading with every step. Her throat was parched, her feet ached, and the gnawing ache of loneliness was a physical weight in her chest. As the afternoon light began to soften, a distant rumble of hooves reached her ears. Mary's heart pounded. Was it them, coming to finish the job? She scrambled behind a thicket of dry brush, her breath held tight in her lungs. But the rider that emerged was not one of James's brothers. He was a tall man, his face weathered by the sun, his eyes a startling shade of blue beneath the brim of his hat. He rode a powerful stallion, its coat the color of obsidian. He stopped his horse a few yards away, his gaze sweeping over the desolate landscape before settling on Mary's hiding place. "You can come out, ma'am," he said, his voice a low, steady rumble. "I don't mean you any harm." Mary hesitated, but his sincerity was a balm to her fear. She rose, brushing the dirt from her dress. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice hoarse from thirst. "I didn't mean to trespass." "You're far from any road," he replied, his eyes softening as they took in her exhausted state. "Where are you headed?" "I don't know," Mary admitted, a single tear tracing a path through the dust on her cheek. "Just away." The rancher dismounted, leading his horse closer. "My name is Ethan," he said, extending a canteen of water. "Ethan Cooper. My ranch is just a few hours' ride from here. You look like you're about to collapse. Let me take you there. You can rest." Mary's initial suspicion was at war with her desperate need for help. She drank greedily from the canteen, the cool water a small miracle. "I can't ask that of you," she said, though her body screamed in protest. "You're not asking," Ethan replied simply. "I'm offering. Get on up. We'll ride easy." He helped her onto the horse, his touch firm and respectful. As they rode, Mary saw the world through a new lens. The endless, empty landscape became a place of potential, not just despair. Ethan pointed out a hawk circling overhead, a distant herd of wild mustangs, and the silhouette of his ranch house rising against the fading light. It was a humble place, but it felt like a beacon in the vast wilderness. When they arrived, a small log cabin with a corral and a barn, Ethan helped her down. "This is it," he said, gesturing to the property. "It's not much, but it's a safe place. Come inside. I'll get you some food." As Mary stepped into the cabin, she felt an overwhelming sense of relief. It was a simple, clean space, warmed by the crackling fire in the hearth. As she ate the warm stew Ethan had prepared, she finally told him her story. The death of James, the cruelty of his family, and the brutal journey that had led her to his doorstep. She told him about her pregnancy, the words catching in her throat. Ethan listened, his face a mask of quiet empathy. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. "Mary," he said, his voice low and firm, "you and that baby, you have a home here. I'll raise that baby as my own if I have to. You're safe here. I promise you that." His words were more than a promise. They were a lifeline. They were the first genuine kindness she had received in months, a powerful anchor in the stormy sea of her grief and fear. And as she looked at this kind stranger who had offered her a new life, a fragile seed of hope began to sprout in the barren landscape of her heart. Life at the ranch settled into a quiet rhythm. Mary, initially cautious, found herself slowly letting down her guard. Ethan was a man of few words, but his actions spoke volumes. He worked tirelessly, from dawn until dusk, tending to his small herd of cattle, mending fences, and preparing for the coming winter. He taught her how to care for the horses, how to mend a saddle, and how to identify the different plants and animals in the surrounding prairie. Mary, in turn, found purpose in her new life. She cooked, cleaned, and helped with chores, her hands calloused but her spirit growing stronger with each passing day. She learned that Ethan was a man who had chosen this solitude, a man who had left the bustling town behind for the peace of the open land. He had no family to speak of, only a few trusted friends he saw rarely. He was an island, and she was a ship that had found a safe harbor. The cabin, which had felt so empty on her first night, began to feel like a home. The scent of pine and fresh bread filled the air. She would sit by the fire in the evenings, sewing or reading from a tattered book, while Ethan mended equipment or simply stared into the flames. There was a comfortable silence between them, a shared understanding that needed no words. One afternoon, a sharp pain shot through her stomach, forcing her to double over. Fear, cold and sharp, gripped her. Ethan, who was mending a fence nearby, saw her and was at her side in an instant. "What is it?" he asked, his voice tight with concern. "The baby," she whispered, her hand clutching her stomach. "Something's not right." Ethan didn't hesitate. He scooped her up and carried her into the cabin, laying her on the bed he had built for her. He sent their trusted ranch hand, a taciturn but loyal old man named Silas, on the fastest horse to town to fetch the doctor. The wait was agonizing. Mary's fear was a suffocating blanket, a return to the helplessness she had felt on the trail. But Ethan's presence was a steadying force. He sat beside her, holding her hand, his thumb stroking the back of her hand, in a rhythm that was both comforting and calming. When the doctor, a gruff old man with kind eyes, finally arrived, he examined Mary and gave his verdict. "Rest," he said. "It's a false alarm, but you're carrying a heavy load, ma'am. You need to take it easy. Stress won't help." He cast a meaningful glance at Ethan. "Make sure she stays off her feet." After the doctor left, Mary's relief was a powerful wave, washing away the fear and leaving behind a profound gratitude. "Thank you, Ethan," she said, her voice thick with emotion. You saved us." "I told you," he said, a rare, soft smile touching his lips. "I'll raise that baby as my own, and I'll do whatever it takes to keep you both safe." Their shared experience of fear and relief had forged a new bond between them. The platonic kindness had a new layer now, a depth that hinted at something more. But neither of them dared to speak it aloud, preferring to let the unspoken feelings grow like the wildflowers on the prairie, slowly, beautifully, and in their own time. The peace of the ranch was shattered one late autumn afternoon. 3 riders appeared on the horizon, their figures growing larger and more menacing as they approached. Mary's heart seized in her chest. She recognized them instantly. James's brothers, Thomas, the oldest and most cruel, Henry, the quiet and calculating one, and their cousin Silas, a brute with a penchant for violence. They had found her. Ethan, seeing them from the porch, placed a protective hand on his rifle. "Stay inside, Mary," he said, his voice hard. "Don't come out." The men dismounted, their faces grim and their eyes filled with suspicion. "We're looking for our brother's wife," Thomas said, his gaze sweeping over the ranch with open contempt. "Mary." "She's not here," Ethan replied, his hand resting on the rifle. Thomas laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Don't lie to us, Cooper. We know she's with you. We followed her tracks. She's carrying our blood, our inheritance. We want her back." "She's not a possession to be owned," Ethan retorted, his voice calm but with an undercurrent of steel. "And she's a widow, not your property. She's free to go wherever she pleases." Henry stepped forward, his eyes glinting with a cold malice. "That's not how it works out here, Cooper. We'll take what's ours. with or without your cooperation. Before the situation could escalate, Mary, unable to bear the thought of Ethan facing them alone, stepped out of the cabin. "I'm right here, Thomas," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Leave us be." Thomas's eyes narrowed as they landed on her rounded stomach. A cruel smile spread across his face. "So you're breeding with this rancher? You think that'll save you? That child belongs to us. It's the last of James's legacy." "It's my child," Mary said, her voice rising, "and I'll raise it with Ethan. This ranch, this life, it's mine now." Thomas shook his head, a grim amusement in his eyes. "That's not what the court will say, Mary. We'll be back, and we'll bring the law with us." They turned and rode away, their threats hanging heavy in the air. The silence they left behind was filled with a new kind of tension. Mary sank onto the porch steps, her legs trembling. "They'll be back," she whispered. "I know," Ethan said, his hand coming to rest on her shoulder. "But they won't get past me. I won't let them take you or the baby. We'll fight this." The confrontation had stripped away the last vestiges of their quiet sanctuary, replacing it with a hard reality. The past wasn't just a memory, it was a living, breathing threat, one that was closing in on them, forcing them to confront not only the dangers of the world, but the strength of their own bond. The confrontation with James's family cast a long shadow, but it also solidified Mary's and Ethan's resolve. The winter months that followed were a testament to their strength and their growing affection. They became a team, working together to prepare for the harsh weather. Ethan taught Mary to shoot a rifle, and she proved to be a natural, her aim surprisingly true. He also taught her the art of trapping and skinning, and she, in turn, showed him how to make new and delicious meals from the wild game he brought in. The snow came in thick, heavy blankets, isolating them from the rest of the world. The isolation, which might have driven others to despair, only brought them closer. They spent their evenings by the fire, talking for hours, sharing stories of their pasts. Mary learned about Ethan's difficult childhood, a life of hard work and little affection that had made him the self-sufficient, solitary man he was today. He listened with quiet understanding as Mary spoke of her life before James, a life of dreams she had put on hold. Their conversations went deeper than small talk. They spoke of their fears, their hopes for the baby, and the future they were slowly, tentatively building together. Their hands would touch across the table, and the simple contact was a jolt of warmth, a silent language of affection. One cold night, a fierce blizzard raged outside, rattling the windows and howling down the chimney. Mary was curled up in a chair, her stomach a prominent mound beneath her blankets. Ethan, sitting across from her, watched her with a look of profound tenderness. "Mary," he said, his voice soft, "I know this isn't what you planned, but I hope you're happy here." Tears welled in Mary's eyes. "Ethan," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I am. I've never been happier. You've given me a life, a home, and a reason to look forward to tomorrow." He rose, came to her side, and gently placed his hand on her stomach. A silent, profound gesture. "This baby, this is a part of us now. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. I promise." The air was charged with unspoken feelings. The "I'll raise that baby as my own" had evolved into "we'll raise that baby together." It was a subtle but powerful shift, a testament to the love that had bloomed in the most unlikely of places. The harsh winter, a time of hardship for many, was for them a season of hope, a time to nurture a new family and a love that had grown from the dusty trail and the kindness of a lone rancher. The thaw came, and with it, a new life. The day the contractions started was a flurry of controlled panic. Ethan, with his rancher's experience of birthing calves and foals, was a surprisingly calm and steady presence. The nearest doctor was hours away, and the roads were still muddy and impassable. They were on their own. Mary, in a haze of pain and fear, was anchored by Ethan's voice and his touch. He coached her, wiped the sweat from her brow, and held her hand so tightly it was a physical testament to his support. He was no longer just a protector, he was a partner, a part of the most intimate, raw, and beautiful moment of her life. After hours of labor, the piercing cry of a baby filled the cabin. A beautiful, tiny boy. He was a miracle, a testament to her strength and her will to survive. Mary, exhausted but overflowing with a love so fierce it took her breath away, held him close. Ethan, his face streaked with tears, looked at the child with a mixture of awe and wonder. "He's perfect, Mary," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "He's beautiful." "He has your eyes," Mary whispered, her heart swelling with love for both the man and the child. They named him James Ethan, a nod to the past and a hope for the future. The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and joyful discoveries. James Ethan was a quiet, contented baby, and the cabin was filled with the sounds of his gurgles and coos. Ethan was a natural father, his large, calloused hands surprisingly gentle as he held the tiny infant, his quiet demeanor giving way to a soft, doting tenderness. Their family, once just an idea, was now a reality. They were a trio, bound by love and a shared history of hardship and triumph. The baby, a physical embodiment of their love and resilience, was the light that chased away all the shadows. The danger from James's family still loomed, but it felt distant now, a problem for a different day. Today, their world was just the three of them, and it was perfect. Just as Mary and Ethan were settling into their new routine, a lone rider appeared on the horizon. It wasn't one of James's brothers, but a man in a black suit, carrying a satchel. He introduced himself as Mr. Blackwood, an attorney from Redemption. He presented a court order, a document that claimed that the child of James and Mary was the rightful heir to the Dawsons' estate, and that since Mary had abandoned the property, she had forfeited her claim to it. The Dawsons, he explained, were seeking full custody of the child. Mary's blood ran cold. The threat was no longer just a rumor, it was a legal reality. "They can't do this," she said, her voice trembling. "He's my son." "The law in this state is on the Dawsons' side, ma'am," the lawyer said, his tone devoid of emotion. "James's will stipulated that his heir would inherit the estate. The Dawsons are prepared to prove in court that you are unfit to care for the child." Ethan's face was a mask of cold fury. "She's not unfit. She's a good mother. I will testify on her behalf." "Your testimony will be considered, Mr. Cooper," the lawyer replied, his eyes narrowing slightly. "But a single rancher's word against a prominent family's, it might not be enough. The Dawsons have powerful friends." He gave them the date of the court hearing and rode away, leaving behind a profound sense of dread. The air in the cabin was thick with fear and anger. "How could they?" Mary whispered, holding her baby tightly. "They're a desperate, greedy family," Ethan said, his voice low and dangerous. "They'll stop at nothing to get what they want, but we won't let them." The legal battle was an entirely new kind of threat, one they were unprepared for. They were a lone rancher and a widow against a powerful, well-connected family. They were outmatched, but they had something the Dawsons didn't, a love for each other and a fierce determination to protect their son. The fight for James Ethan's future was about to begin, and it was a battle they couldn't afford to lose. The news of the court order spread through the small, scattered community. The Dawsons were a well-known, if not well-liked, family. People knew of their cruelty and their greed, and they knew Ethan Cooper, a man respected for his integrity and his quiet kindness. The community, sensing a great injustice, began to rally around them. The local shopkeeper, a kind-hearted man named Walter, offered to contact a lawyer he knew in a larger town. Other ranchers, men and women who had heard of Ethan's kindness to a stranded widow, offered to testify on their behalf. The doctor who had visited Mary in the winter wrote a letter stating that she was a fit and loving mother. Mary and Ethan were overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. It was a stark contrast to the Dawsons' cold, unforgiving world. The people of Redemption, though rugged and self-sufficient, were bound by an unwritten code of honor and mutual support. They saw a wrong, and they were determined to right it. "I can't believe it," Mary said one evening, looking at the pile of letters and the list of names willing to help. "These people, they don't even know me." "They know me," Ethan said, his hand resting on her back. "And they know what's right. People out here, we've got to look out for each other. It's the only way to survive." The lawyer from the big city, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Clara, arrived a few days later. She listened to their story, her expression unreadable. "The Dawsons have a strong case," she said, her voice brisk, "but they are underestimating the power of a community. We will not only argue that Mary is a fit mother, but that they are unfit to raise a child. We'll paint a picture of a loving, stable home versus a cold, greedy one." She began to gather evidence, interviewing neighbors and witnesses. She discovered that the Dawsons had a history of abusing their workers and had even been accused of shady land dealings. The court case was no longer just about a baby. It was about two different ways of life, two different moralities. The court hearing loomed large, but Mary and Ethan were no longer alone. They had a community standing with them, a human shield of support and solidarity. They were not just fighting for their son, they were fighting for their place in the world, and they were no longer afraid. The courtroom was a small, stuffy room, filled with the tension of the community and the grim faces of the Dawsons. Thomas, Henry, and Silas sat on one side, their expressions a mixture of smugness and contempt. Mary and Ethan, dressed in their best clothes, sat on the other, a nervous but united front. The Dawsons' lawyer presented their case, painting a picture of Mary as a poor, transient woman who had taken advantage of a naive rancher. He spoke of her past with James, twisting the facts to make it seem as if she had been a flighty, irresponsible wife. When it was Clara's turn, she was a force of nature. She presented the evidence, the letters from the doctor and the neighbors, the testimonies of the ranchers and the shopkeeper. She spoke of Mary's love for her son, of Ethan's unwavering support, and of the peaceful, loving home they had created. She highlighted the Dawsons' cruelty, their greed, and their history of poor treatment of their own kin. Ethan, on the stand, spoke with a quiet power that commanded the room. He spoke of meeting Mary, of her strength and resilience, and of his promise to care for her and her son. He spoke of the love he felt for the boy, a love that had grown from a promise into a deep, abiding affection. His honesty was a stark contrast to the Dawsons' calculated lies. After hours of testimony and arguments, the judge, a weathered old man who had seen his share of disputes, gave his verdict. He spoke of the importance of family, not just of blood, but of love and commitment. He spoke of the evidence presented, of the contrast between a family that sought to own a child and a family that sought to love and protect one. "I find," he said, his voice resonating through the room, "that James Ethan is best served by remaining in the care of his mother, Mary Dawson, and her partner, Ethan Cooper. The Dawsons' petition for custody is denied." A collective sigh of relief filled the room. Thomas's face flushed with rage, and Henry's lips thinned into a hard line. They had lost. Mary and Ethan looked at each other, tears of relief and joy streaming down their faces. They had won. They had faced the Dawsons and the law, and with the support of their community, they had emerged victorious. Their family was whole, and it was theirs. With the court case behind them, Mary and Ethan could finally breathe. The shadow of the Dawsons was gone. Replaced by the bright sunlight of a new life, they began to plan for the future, not just for the next harvest, but for a lifetime together. Ethan proposed to Mary in the middle of a sun-drenched field, the words simple and sincere, as he was. "Mary," he said, holding her hands in his, "we've been through a lot. You and James. You're my family now. Will you marry me?" "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with happiness. "Yes, Ethan, 1,000 times yes." They were married in a small, intimate ceremony at the ranch, with their neighbors as witnesses. The community celebrated with them, a grand, joyous affair that lasted well into the night. It was a testament to the love they had for each other and the respect the community had for them. Their love story was no fairy tale. It was a story forged in the unforgiving landscape of the West, a story of hardship and resilience, of kindness and courage. It was a story of a woman who had lost everything and a man who had chosen to be alone, who had found each other on a dusty trail and built a new life from the ground up. The ranch thrived, not just because of Ethan's hard work, but because of their shared effort. Mary learned to manage the books, and together they expanded the herd, built a new barn, and added a room to the cabin for James. They taught James the values of the land, of hard work, and of the importance of community. They raised him not as a child of a promise, but as a child of love, a testament to the family they had chosen. Years passed. James Ethan grew into a strong, kind-hearted young man, with his father's quiet strength and his mother's resilience. He learned to ride a horse before he could walk, to read before he could talk. He was the product of two people who had overcome incredible odds to be together, and he carried their legacy with pride. The ranch, once a lonely sanctuary, was now a bustling, thriving homestead. Mary and Ethan had a few more children, their family growing with each passing year. The Dawsons' name faded into obscurity, a grim chapter in a long-forgotten history. Their greed had led them to nothing, while Mary and Ethan's love had created a beautiful, lasting legacy. One evening, Mary and Ethan sat on the porch, watching their children play as the sun set. Mary leaned her head on his shoulder, a profound sense of peace settling over her. "Do you remember, Ethan," she whispered, "that day on the trail, when you found me?" He wrapped his arm around her, a slow, gentle squeeze. "I remember," he said, his voice soft. "It was the day I found my family, the day I promised to raise that baby as my own." Mary smiled, a tear of pure happiness tracing a path down her cheek. That promise, a lifeline in a moment of despair, had become the foundation of their entire world. It was a promise of love, a promise of a family, and a promise that, in the vast, unforgiving landscape of the American West, a lone rancher and a lost widow could find a home, a purpose and a love that would last a lifetime. Their story was not a fantasy, but a real and enduring testament to the power of human connection, of resilience, and of a promise made from the heart.